What's going on, gang? So recently there have been some pretty insane riots going on in the UK right now. What kicked them off was a second-generation Ugandan immigrant butchering 3 little girls to death, apparently at this Taylor Swift-themed yoga studio. He stabbed 11 people in total, and working-class Brits are up in arms. They have been rioting. This has been the straw that has broke the camel's back. They've had enough, and there are now riots and anti-immigration protests going on all over the country. However, this has set off the resident South Asian Muslim communities who have staged counter-protests along with some local leftists. And it is very, very interesting to see what's going on right here. It is, for one thing, very reassuring to see that working-class Brits are still willing to protest, still willing to defend their homeland, still in the game, still fiercely patriotic. But then on the other, it's still very disturbing to see such a clear manifestation of anarcho-tyranny, along with how overrun major British cities are with these new arrivals, these so-called new Brits. The anarcho-tyranny part is especially disturbing because we see how unfairly the British government has treated these so-called working-class rioters. We see how the British government is on native Brits when they riot and protest, but then how lenient and tolerant they will be of other groups. The response of Keir Starmer, the current Labour Party leader and Prime Minister of the UK, is especially telling.
Like you, I was shocked and angered at the killing of George Floyd and the response of President Trump and the US authorities to the peaceful protests, to people rightly demanding justice, has been an affront to humanity. The last week has shone a spotlight on the racism, discrimination and injustice experienced by those from black and minority ethnic communities in the US, in the UK and across the world.
Those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery.
3 working-class British girls were butchered to death in a mass stabbing. And this is the Prime Minister's response. Unbelievable. This sectarianism in the UK is to the point where you have pockets of people in their own communities attempting to be self-governing and autonomous under Islamic religious law in their little enclaves. This is the beginning of what a failed state looks like, and it's entirely self-imposed and voluntary. These are the conditions of anarcho-tyranny. Native Brits, regulated within an inch of their lives, getting thrown in jail over so-called hate speech, and actual stabbings and knife crime raging on, practically unpunished. The British state has proven itself unwilling to uphold fundamental protective law in order to create a climate of controlled chaos where native Brits are brutalized and cajoled into accepting the power of the regime. We have clear, unambiguous, selective enforcement of laws.
The time's 20 to 3, 1440. I'm arresting you on suspicion of improper use of the electronic communications network. I'm just
what?
127 of the Communications Act, okay? So you do not have to say that it may harm your defence if you don't mention one question, something which you later are in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand that?
So I'm actually being arrested?
You're going to be arrested, okay?
Right.
So you got to the police station.
Right.
You, okay, this is in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page. Okay?
Oh, really? Oh, it's a Facebook crime, is it?
Okay.
Right.
So we need to ask you some questions about that.
Right.
Have you got anything in your pockets, Thomas?
I've got my keys. No, it's made it, I think, keys.
So, anyone who's been arrested, we can search them under Section 32 of Police and Criminal Act.
Right.
And that's for dangerous items,
I mean, you said I was going to be arrested under some what information? I'm going to be arrested for posting on Facebook.
Made some comments that are offensive, obscene, and people have made a complaint about that, and it's transferred.
Can you tell me what this comment was?
Okay, well we'll do that when we interview.
All right. And so, what am I going to be locked up for the night, or?
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Anarcho-tyranny is a phenomenon that's going on in the US, the UK, obviously, Germany, the Western nations generally speaking, because this is a way that our elite ensure that people are unable to organize against them. They have selective instances of controlled chaos to keep the working class from having conversations with itself to actually identify problems. So this is why you see that criminality is rampant, but then actual law-abiding citizens are governed within an inch of their lives. And there are plenty of naysayers online going, oh, this is a trap and you're playing right into the globalist hands, etc., etc. But if not now, when? There are literally like little girls being butchered, and you don't expect the community to stand up for itself. Like, come on. A lot of these people towing this line have not actually organized or done anything impactful in real life. And there have been stabbings after this mass stabbing where those 3 little girls died. There have been more stabbings of working class Brits by migrants from these communities after this all happened in these past, it's only been 2 days, really. And they want to tell us it's playing right into globalist hands for these people to rally to their own self-defense. Ridiculous. And you can really see this sort of Stockholm syndrome that a lot of Europeans are afflicted with when you see their response to this whole situation. This one guy, Richard Medhurst, says, Britain ceded the right to call foreigners and immigrants invaders when it invaded 1/4 of the planet and built the largest empire in history. Translation, stop complaining, those girls deserve to be butchered because of things this country did in the past. The world hasn't even begun to recover from this colossal theft of resources and the partitioning of countries on sectarian lines. Look how the Palestinians have suffered. It's a miracle no one has attacked us out of spite. Translation, working class Brits should be cowering in fear indefinitely. Someone then rightly asked, so it is an invasion, and this guy responds, refugees and immigrants flee or migrate, respectively. They don't invade. The British Army invades. The US Army invades. The Israeli Army invades. But you don't want to address that, so keep living in La La Land. And the political commentator Lauren Chen made a relevant observation here. The West is not bombing Pakistan. The West is not bombing India. So why are these migrants flooding in? The fact of the matter is, working class British people are unfortunately not electorally important enough to the Labour Party for them to actually stop immigration. Early on, Keir Starmer made some anti-immigration rumblings, but that has obviously totally fallen through. He's not going to side with the British working class. In the UK, both the Tory party, the major right-leaning quote-unquote conservative party, and the Labour Party, the left-wing party, are so thoroughly captured by elite interests that a major portion of the native British working class sees fit to continue to vote Labour because at least they get benefits. Neither of these parties is socially conservative, and neither of them is actually anti-immigration because the so-called conservative Tory party gets new voters imported from India, and the Labour Party gets new voters from the Muslim world. So neither of these parties actually has a strong incentive to turn off the immigration faucet, so to speak. And this is a major reason why, despite the devastating, crippling loss the Tories suffered in the recent election, they haven't actually bothered to attempt to capitalize on all this discontent being espoused by working class Brits, because there has been such a Stockholm syndrome engendered in so many native Europeans that they would rather work against their own countrymen to serve their own immediate material interests, even though it's incredibly short-sighted and destructive, than they would actually defend their own countries and preserve their own cultures. But one of the more interesting responses to this whole situation has been from the kickboxer, social media influencer, and personality Andrew Tate. Let's see what he had to say on the matter.
If you look at any geographical area on the planet, when men face losing their lands, eventually there's going to be some form of violence as they resist that. It's inside of every single man's DNA to fight for the land that he believes is his. We talk about this with Gaza, Israel right now. So I think it's kind of hypocritical to talk about how the Gazans have been repressed and the land is being taken from them by insane globalists, and then sit there and say, well, the British shouldn't complain that insane globalists are importing millions and millions of military-age males who intend on taking the land from them. Please understand, guys, I'm half black, half white, but the average white man doesn't feel safe to put his daughter out in the street anymore in the country he pays taxes in. And he's paying taxes to pay for a hotel room for some random Muslim or Christian, some random Islamic Bangladeshi or Christian Rwandan to live for free while he works his ass off. You tell me these kind of people are not going to be mad?
One of the main reasons I have a favorable opinion of Andrew Tate is because when you dig beneath the flashy exterior, his positions on issues are always highly consistent. But boy, was this particular position of his not received well at all. Because of that little video, he was named one of the instigators of this riot, and he was surprised and confused when he was labeled as such. He just couldn't wrap his head around why his fellow Muslims didn't support him when he said that strong borders on a European country is practical and not racist. And in this whole conversation, I think a whole lot of people just don't get Tate. They don't understand. Westerners can't fathom why someone would ever convert to Islam. They're just not sure what to make of him, what his principles are, where his values and allegiances actually lie. See, here's this tweet going, "What's his endgame? LMAO, white people are chumps who won't dare stand up to the invaders." Whitey actually stands up. "WTF, I'm so sad that whites and browns are fighting. It's not the immigrants, it's actually poor versus rich. I'm the only rich guy who is on the side of the poor." Where does this guy stand exactly in the ideological sense of the word? And this confusion arises from the fact that you need to take every single one of Tate's tweets in context. Tate is really more of a general deist and not a Wahhabi, unlike many Muslims. He's really a bit of an idealist and got swept up traveling to different countries and seeing people who didn't suffer with any of the mind viruses Westerners suffer with, like gender ideology. He was probably hanging out with bankers and oil tycoons down in the Persian Gulf and thought, man, these are some righteous people. But that did not make the average person of the particular religion he converted to a decent or God-fearing person. This isn't simply Andrew Tate being a grifter or something, as some people have liked to say. Andrew Tate does have sincerely held religious beliefs, and his opinions are highly consistent and form a coherent whole, if you actually know what you're looking for and what his values are. Right, his statement about working class Brits not standing up for themselves was not that they actually wouldn't stand up for themselves, but actually issuing a challenge to incite them to stand up for themselves, to make them rise to the occasion. And with the whole "it's actually poor versus rich" comment at the end here, I think he was one of the main proponents or figures behind this quote-unquote based Christian-Muslim alliance. Because, and there is a kind of a logic to it, because both Christians and Muslims are socially conservative and are injured by globalism. But it was never going to work out for obvious reasons. What Islam means to Andrew Tate, however, is not what Islam means to the average Muslim. He views Islam as a noble warrior religion which produced the likes of Saladin and probably some of those Chechens he was a UFC fighter with. Not this aggressive, cynical, colonizing force that in Britain totally supports the decrepit and corrupt Labour government. And to the people who would suggest that he's simply a grifter for saying these things, he's only incurred anger from Muslims by his actions and by his statements. If he were simply a grifter and nothing else, he would have retracted them immediately upon getting any pushback from the broader Muslim community. Like, from some of these tweets, it really seems like his Muslim card is about to be taken away from him. Because what Tate hasn't realized is that in mainstream Islam, it is shirk. It is an unforgivable sin to say that God has a son, let alone that God is triune. In other words, they're basically virulently opposed to all forms of traditional Christianity and to any groups of people who practice traditional Christianity. And really, this reaction to Tate is all about not having their interests threatened because they don't want their colonization or recolonization, whatever, of the UK to be interrupted by anything. They will literally say they're going to open a halal meat shop near your home and work with their religious team to force Sharia law in your home city, and then turn around and say they're innocent victims of far-right British working-class rioters. A lot of these people in the UK, they perceive their material interests to be conquering. There's no real good reason they're there. They don't really provide anything to wider British society. They're mostly a drain on the British taxpayer. And they are not interested in the bigger picture of defeating globalism. Andrew Tate has had to learn this the hard way. The situation in the UK is interesting because it is perhaps the most pronounced form of anarcho-tyranny the world has ever seen, yet, and it's probably going to continue on for a lot longer. You know, ideally it would end with the Reformed Party getting tons and tons of votes and being elected into office, but I think the next election is in a couple years, so who even really knows how much time we have? And there's doubtless going to be more conflict. Like the rioters, protesters, they are from communities that will not take this lying down, and they've had enough of being brutalized. So things are only going to escalate. The powers that be are uninterested in de-escalating things, and the new arrival, these so-called South Asian immigrant communities are also uninterested in de-escalating things. So things are only going to heat up, in my view, in the next 4 years. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please share it if you did, and Red Channels will catch you in the next one.